Somewhere in the deep Atlantic, a pod of orcas suddenly turns around. Not because they've lost their prey, not because they're tired. They turn around because they heard something. Slow, deep, a rhythmic clicking that vibrates through the water like a warning drum. And every single member of that pod, from the youngest calf to the oldest matriarch, understands exactly what it means. Do not swim further. The ocean's most feared hunters just detected the one creature they refuse to challenge. And the reason has nothing to do with teeth or size. It has to do with something buried in the deep that most humans have never been shown. Orcas are supposed to fear nothing. They flip great white sharks like pancakes and extract their livers with surgical precision. They drown adult blue whales through coordinated suffocation. They've begun sinking European yachts as a form of collective entertainment. There is nothing in the ocean built to intimidate them, except for one silhouette, one shape moving through the deep that makes even the boldest pods change course and reroute their entire migration. Marine biologists have been documenting this behavior for over 40 years, and every recorded observation tells the same eerie story. Whenever orcas cross into sperm whale territory, they don't just retreat. They behave like a strike team that just realized it stumbled onto a battlefield it was never meant to fight on. To understand why, you first have to understand what a sperm whale actually is, because the picture most people carry in their head is wrong. A sperm whale is not just a big animal. A fully grown bull can stretch nearly 20 meters, roughly 65 feet from snout to fluke. It can weigh over 50 tons. Its head alone accounts for a third of its entire body length, and inside that head sits the largest brain that has ever existed on this planet. Larger than any dinosaur, larger than the blue whales, 9 kilograms of dense, hypersocial neural tissue. And that brain is not decorative. It is the operating system behind the most weaponized skull in the natural world. But brain size alone does not stop an orca. Orcas hunt intelligent prey constantly, so something else has to be happening. Something that transforms this slow, deep-diving giant into an animal that even a coordinated pack refuses to touch. Here is where it gets strange, because the answer is not found on the surface. It is found more than a kilometer straight down, in a zone of the ocean where sunlight has never existed. That is where sperm whales spend most of their lives. And that is where the real story begins. Sperm whales dive deeper than almost any air-breathing mammal on Earth, 2,000 meters, sometimes more. They hold their breath for over 90 minutes at a time, crushing themselves under pressures that would flatten a submarine. Down there, in absolute darkness, they hunt giant squid the length of school buses. And to find those squid, they use something no other predator on Earth has evolved to the same degree. A biological weapon disguised as a sensory tool. It is called the click. But calling it a click is like calling a rifle a noisemaker. The sperm whale's forehead is not really a forehead. It is an acoustic cannon. Inside it sits an organ called the spermaceti, a massive lens of waxy oil surrounded by air sacs and reflective tissue. When the whale wants to fire, it forces air through a specialized structure at the front of its skull, and the sound it produces is the loudest biological sound ever recorded on Earth. 230 decibels underwater. For reference, a jet engine at takeoff is around 150. A close-range gunshot sits near 170. Sperm whale clicks are not just loud, they are physically dangerous. At close range, those clicks can vibrate the internal organs of another animal. They can rupture soft tissue. They can disorient, deafen, and, according to several researchers, potentially stun a nearby predator into temporary paralysis. This is the sonar of a creature that hunts in complete blackness and needs to identify a squid the size of a car from 200 meters away. Turn that same weapon toward an approaching orca, and the situation changes very quickly. The pod isn't just facing an animal, it is facing a directional shockwave that can travel through water faster than any predator can swim. And this is only the first layer of what makes them untouchable. Because a lone sperm whale is intimidating, but sperm whales rarely travel alone. Females and calves live in tightly bonded matrilineal groups, and these groups have developed a defensive formation that has ended almost every documented orca attack in modern history before it fully began. It is called the Marguerite Formation, and when scientists first witnessed it, they could not believe they were watching an animal do it. Here is how it works. The moment a threat is detected, the adults in the group turn and press their bodies together in a tight rosette, like the petals of a flower. But there is a twist. Depending on the threat, they can face outward with either their heads or their tails. Head out means the sperm whales are aiming their acoustic cannons and their massive jaws at the enemy. Tail out means the calves are locked into the protected center, and the outward-facing side becomes a wall of the most powerful muscular weapons in the entire ocean, sperm whale flukes. A single strike from one of those tails can shatter a skull, snap ribs, end a fight before it truly begins. Now imagine you are an orca. You have closed in on what looked like a lone whale calf. Suddenly the water around it collapses into a rotating fortress of 60-ton animals, all facing outward, all firing sound waves powerful enough to blur your senses, all swinging flukes that can crush your rib cage in a single hit. What do you do? The answer, based on every observed encounter, is simple. You leave. But here is where the story sharpens into something almost impossible to believe. Because there is one moment in oceanic history, a single, documented event, that changed the way orcas approach sperm whales forever. And most people watching this have never heard about it. In the fall of 1997, off the coast of California, a research vessel witnessed something that overturned decades of assumptions. A pod of at least 35 orcas encountered a group of 9 sperm whales in open water. The orcas attacked, aggressively, repeatedly. This is one of the only well-documented cases of orcas actually pushing a full assault on sperm whales. And yes, one sperm whale died. But the story does not end there, because what the scientists watched over the next several hours was not a hunt. It was a stalemate. The sperm whales formed their rosette, they held it, they defended it, and despite outnumbering the sperm whales nearly 4-1, the orcas could not break through. They tried for hours, they circled, they probed, they struck, and in the end, they gave up and left. That single encounter told marine biologists something extraordinary. Orcas can win a fight against sperm whales, but the cost, in energy, in injury, in risk to the pod's own calves, is so brutal that no rational pod would ever choose to try it again. And that lesson, once learned, spreads. Because orcas do not just live, they teach. Every orca pod carries decades of accumulated survival knowledge, passed from matriarch to daughter, from mother to calf. What one generation learns, the next generation inherits. And somewhere in the deep memory of every wild orca pod is the knowledge that sperm whale territory is simply not worth entering. The calves grow up hearing the distant clicks in the water column. The mothers turn the group away, long before the young even think to investigate. The knowledge becomes cultural. It becomes reflex. It becomes law. Which is why, in most parts of the ocean today, orcas simply do not engage. They hear the clicks. They read the acoustic signature. They know exactly which pod is out there, how many members it contains, and roughly where. And they route around it, silently, without display, without confrontation. It looks like nothing is happening on the surface. But beneath the waves, one of the oldest cold wars in the animal kingdom is being carefully maintained, second by second, kilometer by kilometer. Still, the question remains, even with the clicks, even with the formation, even with the size, why can't a coordinated pack of 30 orcas simply overwhelm a group of sperm whales? Sharks cannot stop them, blue whales cannot stop them, humans have barely stopped them, What is it about sperm whales specifically? And here is the part that most documentaries never explain. Sperm whales do not just defend, they escalate. When a group is threatened badly enough, they can call for backup. Their clicks travel enormous distances underwater, hundreds of kilometers in some cases, and other sperm whale groups, even genetically unrelated ones, have been observed changing course and swimming toward a distress signal. Imagine attacking a family and then realizing that within 20 minutes, more of them are arriving from every direction. Adult bulls, weighing 40 tons apiece, close in from the horizon with their acoustic weapons already firing before they even come into view. That is not a fight. An orca pod is built to survive. And there is a historical layer to this that most people forget. In the 1800s, sperm whales were hunted relentlessly by human whalers, and more than once they fought back. In 1820, a sperm whale bull rammed and sank the American whale ship Essex in the middle of the Pacific, a story so extreme it later inspired one of the most famous novels ever written. Decades later, another vessel, the Anne Alexander, was destroyed the same way. These were wooden ships, weighing hundreds of tons, sunk by a single enraged animal, using nothing but its own skull. Now consider what that same skull, driven by that same intelligence, can do to a 2.5-ton orca in open water. The math is not close. But even that is not the final layer. Because when a sperm whale truly wants to escape, it does something no orca can follow. It dives, straight down, into a world where orcas physiologically cannot exist. Orcas are shallow water hunters. Their bodies are not built for extreme pressure. They rely on light, on surface prey, and on coordinated tactics in the top layers of the ocean. A sperm whale can vanish into 2,000 meters of blackness in minutes, and once it does, the chase is over. The orca pod is left circling an empty surface, waiting for something that will not come back up for another hour. Therefore, the fight is not just difficult, it is structurally impossible to win. You cannot corner what can disappear. You cannot outnumber what can be called reinforcements. You cannot outstrike what has weaponized sound itself, and you cannot overwhelm a formation that has been sculpted by evolution to make attackers exhaust themselves against a rotating wall of muscle. Which brings us back to that pod of orcas in the deep Atlantic, the ones who turned around. Because now you understand what they heard. It was not a threat display, it was not a warning. It was a group of sperm whales going about their normal lives, clicking to each other, hunting squid, and calling calves. Just existing. And that alone was enough. Because orcas do not fear sperm whales the way prey fears a predator. They respect them the way one apex intelligence respects another. Every wild orca pod on Earth carries the same understanding. Below a certain depth, in a certain part of the ocean, there is a creature you do not challenge. Not because you cannot win, but because winning costs more than the ocean will ever pay you back. And there is one detail that makes this entire story stranger still. Because in nearly every recorded observation of orca versus sperm whale interactions, one behavior appears again and again. When a sperm whale group forms the Marguerite Formation and holds its position, the orcas often circle at a very specific distance, just outside the reach of the flukes, just outside the focused range of the clicks. And they wait, they watch, sometimes for hours, then they leave. No attack, no retreat. Just an acknowledgement, a pause. Two intelligences that have taken each other's measure, calculated the cost, and quietly walked away from a war neither side would truly win. This is what makes the ocean so much stranger than most people realize. Beneath the waves, there are not just food chains. There are treaties. There are memories. There are cultural rules older than human civilization, passed down by animals whose social structures we are only beginning to understand. And the silent avoidance of sperm whale territory is one of the clearest examples of it we have ever recorded. Scientists studying orca dialects have noticed something else that hints at how deep this cultural memory runs. Pods that live in oceans with heavy sperm whale populations produce entirely different acoustic patterns when navigating those waters. Their communication becomes shorter, quieter, more controlled. It is as if the entire pod is trying to keep its acoustic footprint small enough to slip past unnoticed. In waters with no sperm whales, the same pods vocalize freely, loudly, and playfully, cross a certain invisible boundary, and their entire behavior downshifts. They know they are entering someone else's kingdom, and they act like it. So the next time you see footage of an orca pod hunting, remember what you are actually watching. You are watching the second most powerful hunter in that ocean. Because somewhere below them, in a zone their bodies can never reach, a 50-ton animal with the largest brain on Earth is diving through blackness, firing shockwaves at squid and quietly reminding every predator above the surface that some borders are drawn in sound. And every orca on the planet has learned to read that line, respect that line, and stay on the safe side of it. The most feared hunters in the ocean fear nothing, except the one place they choose, every single day, to never go.